Alright, what's up, Chemists? Sorry for late stream. This is highly unprofessional of the hobby streamer to do. I had bad decisions, and that resulted in me being. I had a sulfuric abyss moment, and resulted in me being on the can for just far too long tonight. I did, in fact, not allot my time very well. I had a sense of hubris, and well, it bit me in the ass. Maybe out the ass. You know, depends on, No, it doesn't depend at all, actually. It just depends on how deeply you want to think about what I'm saying. I'm talking about pooping myself. Not that was fucking terrible. Why? No, on the toy. I'm moving on from this. We're talking about chemistry tonight. We're watching chemistry videos. Because I had not had the chance to react to a bunch of the chemistry stuff that occurred in October, because I was busy playing Team Fortress 2 for Halloween. And tonight, now instead, we get to catch up on all that good stuff. I had, like, it was kind of a shockingly good month for chemistry tubers, because, like, Nile Red put out some stuff, Explosions&Fire put out some stuff, the United States Chemical Safety Board put out some stuff. There's also plenty of things from periodic videos that I've just kind of overlooked for so long. It's about time to get the show on the road, don't you think? I think tonight we'll actually we'll be starting with the United States Chemical Safety Board, or the USCSB video. I think it's just a good primer, a nice warm up before we get into the more shitposty video afterwards. Then after that, I probably think we'll just go ahead and do some of the more academic ones, more academic focused ones. We got periodic videos, as I mentioned, and we also have a little bit of Chemistorian, which is a channel that I occasionally watch, but not always. He does some good work actually documenting, well, the history of chemistry, as the name would imply. And, you know, tells it in a compelling narrative kind of way. I think it's cool. Though it does tend to be a little bit more geared towards, like, people who are less familiar with chemistry, but, you know, I still enjoy it, and honestly, that's great for you all, because you're probably not all very familiar with chemistry. So anyways, let me quit belaying this, and get over onto the actual stream. Alright, there we go. Huh, interesting, chat did not transfer. I wonder, hold on, let me test that out real quick. I don't want chat to be broken. I didn't have enough time to test this, as I maybe should have actually given a chance. Okay, there it is. It actually works. Everything kind of messed up when I decided to change my Vtuber mouth, my PNGTuber mouth, to be the only thing captured, rather than capturing a giant-ass PNG of myself. I had to scramble to get the layout together tonight. But, hey, I did it, and now, I bet you'd also appreciate if I scrambled my mouth closed so we could actually get to the reactor. So, on to it. If you're not familiar with how this works around here, I typically watch the video, and then I have my drawing tablet up on the upper right side, so I'll be explaining some things as we go on. Alright, let's get to it then. Let's pause the Mega Man DOS music, as good as it is. Alright. Here we go. So we're starting with terminal failure, fire at ITC. I had to do a little bit of testing on this, so I already know it's going to involve lots of flammable chemicals and probably some explosions. I mean, if the thumbnail didn't give it away already. So this ought to be a good one.
March 17th, 2019. The International Terminals Company, or ITC, in Deer Park, Texas. ITC is a bulk liquid storage terminal used to store petroleum and petrochemical products for various companies. On the day of the incident, a pump catastrophically failed, releasing a large amount of flammable liquid from a storage tank into the surrounding containment area. When the flammable liquid ignited,
on the toilet a few
massive
minutes ago.
fire
Okay, never mind. Anyways.
and ITC was unable to isolate or stop the release. The fire burned, intensified, and spread to 14 other tanks within the containment area before it was finally extinguished 3 days later.
The incident at the ITC terminal resulted from several serious failures at the
The environmental impact on that should not have been understated.
Monitors to alert operators that the pump had failed. And ITC had no remotely operated emergency isolation valves that could have safely stopped the release of the flammable liquid. The tank farm's design also meant that other tanks were highly vulnerable. Once the pump failed, it was too late to prevent a catastrophic fire from happening.
I can't wait to hear the management decisions that went into this one, being like, oh, well, we didn't think we needed to separate the tanks because, like, it wasn't mandated by law. We just thought they would never burn, so that's why we never had a firewall separating them. Ain't that just crazy? The firefighter PNGs over there.
At the time of the
Not
incident,
enough
the
budget for the model.
ITC Deer Park terminal housed 242 storage tanks. One of those tanks was called Tank 80-8. It was an above-ground atmospheric storage tank leased by a local company. The tank had a capacity of 80,000 barrels and was used to store butane-enriched naphtha product, a flammable liquid blend of butane and naphtha.
Yeah, that does sound exactly like what it is.
2019, 2 tank trucks.
I guess for anybody unfamiliar with the chemical structures, so we have butane, nice simple 4 carbon hydrocarbon. It's what's typically in your your lighters. It can be liquefied if put under high pressure and cold temperatures. And then naphtha is, it depends on what it is typically it depends on who is referring to it. Naphtha in like the petrochemical industrial sense that I'm sure the USCSB is referring to here is more just like a mixture of several lighter hydrocarbons from a oil separation stack. So there's multiple different structures. But it kind of derives from it might be a chicken or an egg kind of story, but it does derive some nomenclature, or there is some common nomenclature with the material known as naphthalene, which is definitely one of the main components of naphtha, which is 2 fused 6 carbon rings with double bonds in between every other carbon that has a lot of delocalized electrons in those double bonds. So while I'm drawing these double bonds in one place, they are actually kind of moving entirely around each ring, or delocalized around the entirety of the ring. So yeah, you could probably have if you wanted to actually get to the butane dissolved in something without just storing compressed liquefied butane, which would absolutely be a huge energy draw just to keep things cold. This would be a pretty efficient way to do it. It would in fact dissolve in such naphtha product, and that good. All right, let's resume.
Arrived at the terminal. 360 barrels of butane from those trucks.
360 barrels of butane on the wall.
80-8. The tank circulation pump mixed the newly added butane with the butane-enriched naphtha product already in the tank. The pump remained on overnight. After that day's delivery, tank 80-8...
It's not the wisest idea to leave the pump on overnight if it's not being attended, but they haven't said that yet, but I'm guessing.
ITC planned to transfer the contents of the tank to a...
Internet will recover. Yes, it does seem to be. Okay, very weird. As long as I'm still in the same stream, everything's not interrupted. Okay, weird. I don't know. Random internet outages sometimes. Uh-oh. Speaking of random internet outage. Hold on. Technical difficulties. Sorry. Let's put the music back on while I look at a couple of things. Okay, so let's see. My internet is plugged in as it should be. Wi-Fi is turned off. Set to only turn back on manually. Connection is wavering. Is my Ethernet cable plugged in properly? I mean, it could just be just a weather event. Internet likes to stop working during the rain. Seem connected. Connection seems stable-ish. Alright, we might have a couple of dropped frames, I guess, but overall I think everything's doing okay. Alright. Back to the imminent fire hazard. So anyways, what was the context again? I got distracted there.
To a chemical tanker ship around noon the next day.
So they're planning on selling
at
oil,
approximately
petrochemicals.
7:25 a.m. on March 17th, data for the tank indicated a series of unanticipated changes.
Okay, so the
These
data
included
recorder
changes in the pump
up.
operating pressures, as well as in the tank's average flow rate and overall tank volume. But none of these changes were significant enough to trigger alarms in the central control room. Therefore, the control room operator was not alerted to the problem.
Control room operator just like, there's no red light, so nothing could possibly be
wrong.
wrong.
Installed on the motor side of the pump shaft had failed. This caused a misalignment in the pump,
hold on.
resulted in significant.
That's very funny. Just looking like at that as like someone who's learning like some 3D modeling kind of stuff. Like you could tell like they just took like the one ball bearing here that is absolutely just fucking crunking it over there, and like they just decided like, fuck it, just put a bunch of vertices in a random spot, make them arbitrarily connect, and just like rotate it. It's just like, here's pure chaos in a something you would never ever normally use as an actual 3D model. They just decide, screw it, we'll throw that in there. It gets the point across. I got to give them that, but it's very funny just to watch you know, the geometry go crazy like that.
Installed on the motor side of the pump shaft had failed. This caused a misalignment in the pump that resulted in significant vibrations as it continued to operate.
Alright, so the ball bearing is causing the pump to go crazy.
The vibrations caused 4 gland nuts that secured the pump's mechanical seal to loosen. The gland nuts became so loose that by 9:30 a.m., the mechanical seal partially opened.
Oh, that's
because
bad.
The pump was still circulating material in tank 80-8, butane-enriched naphtha product from the tank began to escape through the partially open seal.
You know, I bet you as well. I was gonna say I bet you as well. This is the actual color of the pump. It was so rusty it wasn't maintained. But if it was rusty, it probably would have not slid off so easily because rust expands in comparison to the original metal. So rust would have shattered. This is actually like a apparently mostly well-maintained item. They didn't catch the ball bearing, so not that well-maintained.
Around 9:45 a.m., the 4 gland nuts came off entirely, causing the pump's mechanical seal to catastrophically fail. Even more flammable liquid escaped from the failed pump. The liquid accumulated around the pump, and flammable vapors hovered near the ground and collected in low-lying areas.
And again, no one's there to watch.
Operators working outside near tank 80-8 to notice anything out of the ordinary.
Cameras
The
either.
terminal did not have any monitors in place that may have alerted operators of a problem, such as flammable gas monitors or equipment monitors.
How can you not have a flammable gas monitor? You're literally working with aromatic hydrocarbons the entire time. Like that is, I mean, at my job, that is something that we have to actually keep an eye out for. I mean, if anybody even decides that they wish to use flammable gas in their research, like they need monitors all over their lab space. It is quite ridiculous that a petrochemical processing facility would not have flammable gas monitors everywhere, just in case something goes wrong, because it's bound to happen at some point. Something's not going to be well maintained. Someone's going to be, sleeping on the cameras. Like, you need that.
That register excess vibrations of the pump. Further, the decrease in tank volume did not trigger any alarms in the central control room.
And no alarms.
As a result, no measures were taken to isolate or secure the release.
Some cameras at least would help with this.
In 30 minutes,
the alarms are failing.
The release grew to the equivalent of 3 concrete mixing trucks worth of flammable liquid. At 10 a.m., flammable vapors in the area around the pump ignited, causing a large fire to erupt. Within minutes, members of the ITC emergency response
now there's a problem.
Arrived on scene. But the tank was not equipped with a remotely operated emergency isolation valve. And because
that's not up to
fire
code.
engulfed the area, emergency responders were not able to access the tank's main valves to manually close them. Therefore, ITC was unable to stop the large volume of flammable liquid in tank 80-8 from escaping. The tank was surrounded by 14 other similar storage
that's a
tanks
lot of
within
fuel.
a common containment area. Without subdivisions to separate them, these tanks were vulnerable to the large fire that was spreading along the ground. Later that day, other emergency responders arrived with additional firefighting equipment and resources to assist the ITC emergency response team. But despite their best efforts, the fire continued to grow. It eventually spread to the other 14 tanks located within the containment area.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that the fire department shows up to help, but there's not really much you can do in that kind of situation. Like, if you cannot stop the leak from happening in the first place, that entire tank is going to start slowly leaking out. It's not contained. It's going to start warping everything else. Other things are going to catch on fire. And the moment that, another tank ruptures, then more naphtha and butane is going to leak out, and there's going to be more fire. It's going to be even harder to contain. This is one of those things that can only be contained with prevention. You cannot contain this with reaction. Safety is critical. You cannot be overlooking this. At least nobody seems to have died. That's good. Usually these CSB reports have somebody like dying because, a manager said, "Oh, don't tighten that lug nut. It'll cost you 3 minutes." And they get like domed in the head by, a rogue piece of metal like attacking them. But thankfully, I guess, we'll see what the causes were. I imagine somebody had some poor management decisions here.
By the next evening, March 18th, ITC realized the need for additional resources.
Oh, you think?
They requested assistance from a third-party emergency response services provider who arrived on scene the following morning, March 19th.
I love the decision-making of whoever, made that call. It was just like, so you waited for a full day before caving in and finally calling for extra assistance. Now, what part of the whole one tank is burning near a bunch of other flammable tanks did not make you immediately think, this is going to be a bigger and bigger problem the longer that I take to actually call in extra assistance?
With their arrival,
What pushed you over the
were
edge?
able to turn the tide and work to extinguish the remaining tank fires and prevent reignition. The fire was ultimately extinguished around 3 a.m. on the morning of March 20th.
Took 2 days
No
to
ITC
extinguish this fire.
personnel or emergency responders were injured by the
Hooray.
massive fire that burned for 3 days. The local community,
3
however,
days.
experienced serious disruptions. It
Yeah.
included several shelter-in-place orders due to benzene-related air quality concerns. On March 22nd, at around 12:15 p.m., the secondary containment wall surrounding the tank farm partially collapsed.
Excellent. So they didn't even have the primary containment for each tank. And then, due to poor maintenance on the wall surrounding the whole area, which is only like a foot high, it looks like, just everything started completely breaking. And now I'm guessing there's going to be oil in the water supply.
A mixture of released hydrocarbon products, firefighting foam, and contaminated water escaped.
Delicious.
And eventually reached the Houston Ship Channel.
Oh, dead
Result,
fish.
A 7-mile stretch of the Houston Ship Channel and many nearby waterfront parks were closed. Operations to clean up the contamination continued for several weeks.
This is what Big Oil doesn't give a fuck about.
CSB launched
Barely
an
even punished for
investigation
this. They
and
don't pay for the
found that
cleanup.
5 safety issues contributed to the severity of the incident at ITC.
All right, so 5 safety issues. Let me take my guess as a safety professional. So we're going to have 1, the lack of sufficient or properly alarming equipment in the control room, like they're calibrated poorly. Otherwise, the control room would have at least found this earlier. 2, we had that lack of flammable gas detection and lack of levees to contain the spill in each one. So I'm going to say that that's probably just a general, where are your engineering controls, bro, kind of situation. 3, as I've harped on many times, just lack of maintenance, lack of routine maintenance, because why did the levee break? Why did the pump ball bearing not get replaced sooner? Like, it doesn't just snap in one day and then, all the damage is done instantaneously. No, that shit happens over time. So let's see. We're at 3 here. 4, let's see. Didn't seem like 4, we kind of mentioned earlier, there wasn't, like, really good oversight outside of the control room. So, that probably contributed to this like really starting badly. If there's at least somebody, you know, periodically checking on site like what's happening, then you wouldn't have this issue happen in the first place. I guess this sort of falls under that second point I made about engineering controls. Like there could have probably been like a or the USCSB here mentioned that like there should have been a remote shutoff valve. That would have helped very much in an emergency. Though I could also see that being a fifth point, maybe separate, because it's emergency response versus preventative response. And then, what other problems contributed to this? Well, I don't know. I think that's a pretty good list. Maybe I don't have a fifth bullet point exactly, but I think all of those things are going to be mentioned. Maybe there'll be a further mention of like, oh, they did not adhere to, you know, certain recommendations for the industry and they only stuck strictly to what was required.
They are pump mechanical integrity, flammable gas detection systems, remotely operated emergency isolation valves, tank farm design, and PSM and RMP
what the
applicability.
Fuck is that?
The first safety issue is pump mechanical integrity. Mechanical integrity is defined as the management of critical process equipment to ensure it is designed and installed correctly, and that it is
It does in fact sound what it in fact is what it sounds like.
Operated and maintained properly. Mechanical integrity reduces the likelihood of unexpected equipment failure.
Are you checking to make sure that your mechanics work?
The CSB found that ITC had a mechanical integrity procedure in place for certain equipment, including pumps.
All right, that's good.
But the procedure did not list any specific requirements for managing the pumps, such as maintenance procedures, training for pump replacements and rebuilds, or routine preventive maintenance activities.
So essentially, this is what their pump maintenance guide looked like. So we have ITC pump maintenance standard operating procedure, SOP. Step 1. Look at it. 2. Is it okay? 3. Report to supervisor. Can you take a look at it? And does it look okay? All right, well, then there are no problems whatsoever. Absolutely no specificity to determine how to actually look at this pump and see if it's working right. Hey, Proto, Wi-Fi is being fucky again, stuck on mobile. That's all right. I was having a couple of, I don't know, some random internet downs a bit ago, but it seems we've stabilized now. But we're in the middle of the hazard analysis part of the this USCSB video here. What basically happened is, let's just do a quick little rewind. Basically happened is one of these big old petrochemical tanks sprung a leak because, as we're about to talk about, the pump had a failed ball bearing that was just absolutely gnarly, started causing really bad vibrations within the pump. You see there. Then the hydrocarbon oil started spilling out everywhere. There was insufficient equipment to detect that there was a leak. Nobody was around to see it. It caught fire. The whole place catches fire because nothing can contain it and no one can actually take a look. So, 4, repeat until catastrophic failure. True, you're so right. And even after the catastrophic failure, you know, who's to say, what are the chances it's going to happen again, right? Like, you know, it's not going to happen a second time. We don't need to put money into this. Like, I think the odds are good that we'll be fine. Welcome, Zach. Nice to meet you. Yeah, that's what happens when when the fail-safes fail. It's really more like when there are no fail-safes. All right, back into it then. I said back into it. There we go.
For certain equipment, including pumps. but the procedure did not list any specific requirements for managing the pumps, such as maintenance procedures, training for pump replacements and rebuilds, or routine preventive maintenance activities. Furthermore, the company's mechanical integrity procedure only applied to equipment used to handle or store materials that the company listed as regulated chemicals. And naphtha and butane are not included on that list.
So how does a company list of regulated chemicals not include things that are flammable? Like, those are OSHA regulated. Maybe they're not using it in a laboratory setting, but like they literally have hazards. They have transport hazards. They are transporting in big cargo ships hazardous flammable material. Like, it's not gross negligence or nepotism. Yeah, I'll say the gross negligence or maybe purposeful negligence, being like, well,
therefore,
we don't have to.
80-8 and its associated pump were not subject to the company's mechanical integrity procedure.
So, in addition, I guess the step 0 for this pump maintenance thing is step 0. You know, don't. Just don't even bother, bro. It's fine.
For all pumps and highly hazardous chemical service.
Love to see what the list actually looks like. Yeah, I think that would be.
Type of proactive
Yeah, it would be pretty good just to see how fucking
ITC
sparing it is.
Opportunities to identify and correct issues with the circulation pump before it catastrophically failed.
The second safety issue found at ITC is flammable gas detection systems.
Oh yeah, no engineering controls.
Systems are used in many process industries to protect personnel, property, and neighboring communities from the potential consequences of an accidental release. For example, a gas detection system can trigger alarms if it senses that gas or vapor concentrations are higher than normal.
It's not like, you know, the controls, like the control operators here needed any more alarms. They had all these alarms. They just never went off. It's just so crazy. Also, I love how this graphic requires that there must be a blue screening computer in the operating like control area. Like, it's just like, yeah, I feel like the animator had some fun being like, you know what, we got to emphasize that this entire place is just not functional. So like, yeah, just make it so their Windows OS crashed due to, you know, Albanian virus or something. Yeah, an accurate representation of brains. Also, interesting, I don't know if this is an accurate console, but like there is like 2 number pads on the control console. There's the standard one, and then there's also one that goes up to 12. I mean, I could see why maybe that's useful. If you're using like, you know, 10, 11, and 12 very consistently as separate numbers, but it's strange. It's a strange choice of modeling.
In this case, actions can be taken to stop a release before a potential fire or explosion occurs. At ITC, a hazard review team recommended in 2014 that a flammable gas detection system be installed near tank 80-8.
Oh,
the CSB
so they
found
were recommended.
ITC did not implement this recommendation, and the company did not document why the installation never occurred. Therefore, in 2019, with no flammable gas detection system in place, there were no alarms to alert personnel about the initial release of flammable liquid from the tank.
Yeah, it's absolutely just corner cutting, or more just like, you know, well, we heard a recommendation. We didn't, you know, no one said we had to, so it's just like, you know, conveniently ignore it and then just be like, what happened later on? What? I don't know. We never did anything. We didn't have to. The sign can't stop me because I can't read. Yeah.
As a result, the release continued for approximately 30 minutes with no one noticing or attempting to stop it before the fire finally ignited.
Terminals and other storage tank farms that handle large volumes of flammable or highly hazardous substances should install flammable gas detection systems at their facilities. These type of systems can warn operators about the presence of flammable substances so that actions can be taken before a major fire or explosion occurs.
Therefore, the CSB made a recommendation to the American Petroleum Institute to update its standard for terminal.
It's still the most irritating thing about having to watch these is just like, you know, the US CSB can recommend that the, you know, the Petroleum Institute and these other quote-unquote overseeing bodies just make a addition to their, requirements for or best practices for what petroleum companies can do, and yet it's like, okay, we'll take that recommendation and then throw it immediately in the bin, just like how, we had this flammable gas recommendation and threw that in the bin at the company level. Maybe the intercompany level will care. I doubt it. Yeah, do safety recommendations increase shareholder value, though? We'll have to ask our shareholders about this. 1 second. Walk, 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 walk. Walk, 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 walk back. All right, they said, what the fuck is a gas detection system? And that's the end of that conversation. They decided to then take a trip to Tahiti for 3 months and never heard from again.
And tank facilities to include a discussion of flammable gas.
Oh, a discussion of the systems. Not even a mandate.
The third safety issue found by the CSB is remotely operated emergency isolation valves. None of the tanks involved in the fire at ITC were equipped with remotely operated emergency isolation valves.
Ooh.
These valves are used to isolate the contents of above-ground storage tanks from their associated equipment, such as pumps, in the case of a release. Instead, Tank 80-8 was equipped with a manual isolation valve that could not be safely accessed once the fire ignited around the tank.
Yeah, the manual isolation valve really only helps in this case if, like, you have somebody watching constantly, which they did not.
As a result, flammable liquid from the tank continued to flow through the failed pump, adding fuel to the growing fire.
Companies with above-ground atmospheric storage tanks that contain large volumes of flammable or highly hazardous substances should install remotely operated emergency isolation valves. These valves are designed to ensure that releases can be stopped quickly and remotely from a safe location, thereby mitigating a much larger incident.
The fourth safety issue found at ITC is tank farm design.
Yeah,
the National Fire Protection Association defines minimal requirements for tank farm design.
I'll give him the half commendment of this. At the very least, it's just this 15 pack of tanks here, and they are in fact separated into at least a couple of different corrals. They could have just had one mega tank farm that is like, 300 tanks wide, and if just one fails, the entire thing goes up. So I guess good job for designing the plant of having separate, stations like this.
It's Flammable and Combustible Liquids Code, known as NFPA 30.
The NFPA. The NFPA is something that torments me with regulations at work all the time, but that's okay. They're doing their job.
The CSB found
faint
that
praise,
the
exactly.
ITC tank farm was designed largely in accordance with applicable NFPA 30 requirements in place at the time of construction. But regardless, elements of the tank farm design made it difficult for emergency responders to slow the initial fire and allowed
the classic, oh, well, we built it up to code 40 years ago. What do you mean things changed? Time hasn't moved forward. It's a flat circle.
Fire to spread to other tanks within the tank farm. These elements include many tanks spaced closely together and a lack of subdivisions within the containment area. As a result, hydrocarbon and petrochemical products, firefighting foam, and contaminated water accumulated within the tank farm and ultimately breached the facility's secondary containment wall,
right, that was
massive
too.
Contamination of local waterways. The CSB notes that while NFPA 30 defines minimum requirements for tank farm design and spacing, other voluntary industry guidance documents by FM Global
Here's
and
the voluntary
American Petroleum
guidance again.
Institute provide more robust tank farm design criteria.
ITC was not required to implement additional industry guidance recommendations since they were voluntary, and also because many of them were developed after construction of the tank farm. However, doing so could have prevented the escalation of this incident.
Therefore, the CSB made a recommendation to ITC to conduct an evaluation of the design of all new and existing tank farms at the ITC Deer Park Terminal. The evaluation should assess the adequacy of the containment wall and drainage system designs.
Yeah, I mean, it's
the
good to tell them to
impact
take a
of
look around the
firefighting
place and make sure, like,
Finally,
stuff will
the
be
fifth
contained again.
safety
But like,
issue identified
like
at
the
ITC
bare minimum.
is PSM and RMP applicability.
All right. I don't know what the hell
Atmospheric
this means.
storage tanks, like Tank 80-8, are exempt from OSHA's Process Safety Management, or PSM, standard.
Well, that would probably explain why that they don't consider flammable hydrocarbons to be hazardous. They'd say OSHA isn't, it's exempt from OSHA. It's great. Exactly what we want.
This means that ITC was not required to implement a formal process safety management program that could have effectively identified and controlled the hazards of the tank.
That's how you
For
end
example,
up with this.
Had Tank 80-8 been subject to OSHA's PSM standard, ITC would have been required to have a mechanical integrity program that could have identified issues with the circulation pump before it failed. And the company would have been required to track the 2014 recommendation to install a flammable gas detection system and document
even
the
required to
resolution
track that
in a timely
recommendation.
manner.
Jesus.
The CSB has investigated 2 other incidents where it determined that the atmospheric storage tank exemption contributed to the severity of the incidents. Those incidents resulted in a fatality, multiple injuries, and significant environmental damage.
Yup.
The CSB believes this exemption should be eliminated.
As a result, the
We've believed it for the last probably 40 years, and no one's listened to us.
CSB made a recommendation to OSHA to eliminate the atmospheric storage tank exemption from the PSM standard.
Yeah, good luck with that.
In
OSHA
addition,
hasn't updated
EPA's
shit
Risk
in like 40
Management
years.
Plan, or RMP,
They can't.
rule
They need
did not
Congress to
apply
work.
to Tank 80-8. That is because the naphtha and butane mixture was exempted, as the rule only applies to materials with an NFPA flammability rating of 4, while the mixture is rated 3.
All right, so I guess to explain some of the NFPA stuff of what they just mentioned there. So for those unfamiliar, if you've ever seen, hold on, let me draw it better. If you've ever seen, close enough. Oh, not close enough. Hold on. I am what we call bad at drawing things. You know what? Hold on. I'm good. Embarrassing myself being unable to draw a square. I will, in fact, just use my tools available to me to draw it one for me, and then rotate it 45 degree. Why the fuck is it rotating that way? That's not... What? That is not what I just drew. Maybe they didn't draw a square. Maybe I fucked up. Okay. Okay, here we go. If you've ever seen the... Oh, that's the selection. Me not knowing my own program. You've ever seen like the fire diamond one of these things on like a propane tank outside of like your local store or whatever? That's what this NFPA thing is, and this gives you like the ratings of various NFPA what the National Fire Protection Association says the hazards are. It's not the OSHA standard. In fact, it ends up being confusingly different, where the higher a number is, the more hazardous it is, where the lower the number is, the less hazardous it is. Where OSHA's GHS hazard communications for chemicals does the opposite and flips those numbers. And so old heads or industry heads tend to deal with the NFPA more, and then they get confused when they see a chemical safety data sheet and it's reversed and it doesn't like compute to them. So like, great consistency between everything. And are we back? Come on, are we back? Okay, we're back. Strange. All right. Sorry for the interruption. Internet is just being a little strange, a little weird tonight. I don't know why. But so the NFPA diamond looks like this. It has 3 different sections for, you know, ratings about each chemical. So down here, I wanted to change my color. Thank you. We have flammability. Flammability. This one is health hazard. Then we have reactivity. And then we have bonus. So as it kind of sounds, flammability, how flammable is it? Health hazard, if you eat this or get stand around it too much, how much cancer will you get? And reactivity being, how likely is this to detonate in your hands? So things with high reactivity are like, you should not be looking at this. It will probably explode if the sunlight hits it wrong. And then you have your bonus square, which is basically for any additional hazards that might need to be communicated. So, for instance, this W with a line through it would mean don't let this come in contact with water. It would react or likely catch on fire, given what I've drawn here. I've probably drawn something that is a strong pyrophoric chemical, meaning one that ignites on contact with air and most likely water. So, yeah, the thing they were saying here, it's that they only would have regulated or required whatever this last thing was if the flammability rating was 3 and not 4. Or if it was... If it was 4 and not 3, but butane and naphtha apparently are only number 3 instead of number 4, so they're not flammable enough, apparently, to get the regulation, which is bullshit, considering, your household lighters are filled with butane. Like, it will ignite. It's very flammable. Almost everyone knows that butane's flammable once they know what butane is. Alright, back to the video.
As with OSHA's PSM standard, had the EPA RMP rule applied to the tank, even if the pump had leaked, additional safeguards should have been available. These include flammable gas detection and remote isolation equipment that could have quickly identified and stopped the release and prevented the large fire.
NFPA 3 rated materials have resulted in significant explosions and fires, several of which have been investigated by the CSB. We believe these materials should be covered under the RMP rule.
Therefore, the
if it's still
CSB
pretty
made a
flammable,
recommendation
it's
to
flammable.
the EPA to expand coverage of the RMP rule to include all flammable liquids, including mixtures, with a flammability rating of NFPA 3 or higher.
This was a very large and very disruptive event. The massive fire burned for 3 days, caused over $150 million in property damage at the
Not
facility,
the property.
and put the surrounding community at serious risk.
That's what I care
It
about.
also significantly impacted the environment.
And
This
I care about that
disastrous
too.
event could have been prevented if proper safeguards had been in place at the facility. A serious gap in federal regulations also contributed to the severity of this event. We believe that our recommendations, particularly to OSHA and EPA, to expand regulatory oversight of these kinds of chemicals and facilities will help ensure that a similar incident does not occur in the future. Thank you for watching this CSB safety video.
Wouldn't you believe it? The current
more
administration
information,
doesn't really
go to
like these US CSB guys. They've been, there's been a lot of lobbying over many years to try to get rid of these guys. But wouldn't you just believe it that this agency, this governmental independent agency, it was on the chopping block back when like NASA was also on the chopping block a couple months ago. I think they barely managed to squeak by and still be making stuff, but yeah, that budget, then that organization might get closed. It's in a precarious spot. But yeah, so corporate neglect, not wanting to actually, put safety equipment up. Story of unfortunately my life. Well, not my life, but of everyone else's life. So, well, thankfully now with that dreariness out of the way, we can. And speaking of explosions and fire, we can actually go ahead and watch the new video from Explosions and Fire.
This is the
So it'll be a much more upbeat video, and the best part is we've seen Australian Bogan Man before talk about how he makes crazy explosives in his shed, but the best part is now is that this time it's a main channel upload we get to watch, so it has more memes and editing injected into it. It's not just a a more dry kind of raw footage experience. Disconnected for a bit there. We back. I have been back for a little bit. I don't know how long you were necessarily down either, but we are back. Hopefully not everybody was ejected so quickly or for so long. Because now I'm actually getting a very stable connection. I have no drop frames at all, so well, at least you're just in time to connect for the Australian chemistry again. So yeah, we're gonna be making perbromate pyrotechnics apparently. So I'm sure as he's going to explain, the perbromate ion is let's see. How do I draw this? Perbromate is going to look like this with all the oxygens here. Bromine's not going to bother following the octet rule. I'm pretty sure perbromate is a -1 charge, so we just do something like this. Yeah, it's gonna look like this kind of ion. Very energetic. Does not. You have an energy. It's energetic because we have the competition between bromine being a highly electronegative element that wants electrons, and oxygen being an even more highly electronegative element that wants electrons. And so they're kind of all bonded in this like tenuous connections. Basically, everybody in this ion is saying, "Boy, I sure would love some more electrons." And what's a good source of electrons? Well, a something flammable, like say butane, like we were talking about. But I'm sure Tom's gonna come up with something much more creative than just butane. But you get a bunch of carbon-hydrogen bonds that they kind of want their electrons. You know, they're fine as they are, but given the right encouragement, they'd be happy to donate them. And oxygen and bromine make very, very strong cases for why they should have the electrons and you should have nothing. So we're gonna see some cool energetics coming out of this. Then I'm excited. It's been a long time since I've seen a Tom main channel video.
This is the perbromate ion. In the early 1960s, many scientists had been trying to make this for years. A lot of them thought it was impossible until one man in the late 1960s finally made it. And it really makes you think, what is all this for? You know? Like, what is the point of everything? What's the...
You don't ask that question when you're in chemistry. You just do it because you can. It's legitimately the Aperture Science motto.
To another episode of Explosions and Fire. And today we're talking about perbromates. But before we talk about perbromates, we have to talk about chlorates. And when I say talk about, I mean we're going to blow some stuff up. Let's just go blow some stuff up immediately. Chlorates are a very common oxidizer in pyrotechnics, and they're very good at oxidizing a metal fuel, especially. You've got this high oxidation state chlorine surrounded by 4 oxygens, so it's a lot of oxygens to give. Beautiful. But also, the small ion is actually very stable. It doesn't want to give up those oxygens very easily. Being so chemically stable means that the pyrotechnic mixtures aren't that sensitive and won't chemically degrade. But also, perchlorate is very good in aqueous situations as well. When you have it in solution.
So yeah, I guess that's a good point to put out. A good thing to maybe pause and describe a little bit. So yeah, we're just doing our brief background in perchlorate salts here. Which are, as the name kind of implies, they are the chlorine analog of a perbromate, and so Tom's talking about kind of why they're more stable. That kind of has to do with this description here of bromine. Hold on, let me see if I can't go back to. Hold on. Let me hide the capture for a second. Wrong one. That kind of goes back to my discussion on the electronegativity of certain elements. Let me just pull up a chart of electronegativity. Let's see here. Is that a pretty clear one? That's roughly clear. What about this one? All right. This works well enough. It has numbers on it. All right. Just make sure it'd be good to share this. Okay. Oops. Hold on. Open image. Can I open image? A new tab. There we go. All right. So, all right, content back. Okay, so back to the kind of the electronegativity chart here. You have oxygen in your upper right corner of the periodic table. So if you hopefully, can you see my mouse capture? I don't think you can actually. Okay, maybe I'll just copy this into the secondary window then. We could take a look at it. Okay. So oxygen here has in all of its crusty JPEG glory, electronegativity of 3.44. We have bromine with 2.96, and we have chlorine with 3.16. So they're all kind of in this, this territory of highly electronegative elements here. So let me write those down real quick. 3.4, 3.16. Actually, wait, that was 3.4. 3.16, and then bromine was, what was it? 2.96. Okay. So what the units of the number is not entirely important. It's a unitless number, and it's just meant to be a relative scale of how much something wants an electron. And so of all of these elements, as I kind of mentioned earlier, oxygen really wants it. Bromine wants it pretty badly. Chlorine also wants it pretty damn badly as well. You see 2011 New York State Regents chemistry reference table. No, this is from Nord's Learning. This might be Swedish, I guess. I have no idea. But so the same reason that there's this kind of tug of war with bromine and oxygen, it's not very balanced. There is kind of a strong predilection for the oxygen to like get the electrons that are in these bonds. For those who are junior to chemistry, the bonds contain electrons, 2 electrons each. So they're, and they're what is connecting the nuclei of the atoms together. In a bond, there's going to be some asymmetry based on electronegativity. And with the higher electronegativity number gets the electrons more of the time / higher density. That's a complicated topic, but just kind of go with me on this one. And so you end up having in this perbromate a pretty wide gap where the bromine electrons are getting pulled on pretty hard in all 4 directions. And as a result, Tom kind of mentioned the instability of this. This is maybe too much pull on the bromine. Like the oxygen can pretty successfully just completely rip the bromine or the electrons off the bromine atom and just like no bonds for you. The bonds don't even form because oxygen just flees away with all the electrons. Or at least they're very difficult to form and keep stable. Meanwhile, in the chlorine, you still have a similar case, but the arrows, or well, the polarization of the bonds is much weaker, which I'm representing by making my arrows much shorter. And that's because this 3.4 and this 3.16 are much closer together in number. And so even just that small scant difference of 0.2 on the electronegativity scale between bromine and chlorine makes perchlorates just way more stable of compounds. So they're not going to fall apart with the oxygen just flying right off. Oxygen's electronegativity is part of why it's so essential to what makes Earth, right? Yeah, it does. So I can maybe put on a little music if we're gonna keep talking about this. Ah, yes, that's the relaxing and not at all high tense music that I was looking for. Yeah, let's make another layer here. I can maybe do some explanations, but yeah, so you have connection, weird. All right, connection back. All right. You have, your typical water molecule. You have oxygen, again, at like 3.4 on the electronegativity scale. Hydrogen's like a 2.1, if I recall correctly. 2.2, 2.1. Okay, probably depends on who you're referencing, but sure, we'll go with 2.2. And so, yeah, again, there is that kind of bond polarity that results in that. So you have the negative charge from the oxygen-hydrogen bond moving towards the oxygen. And, as a result, you end up having a highly polar molecule, and water is what it is. It has weird properties because of it's this smaller polar molecule. The water likes to stick to itself. It has a pretty high boiling point for being such a light molecule. It does a lot of reactions with like the oxygen, the electrons on the oxygen are ready to go and like attack things and like make new bonds with stuff. So yeah, no, it's oxygen's high electronegativity is kind of a key part of why Earth is like what it is. Now, I mean, granted, we have water in abundance, which is unique compared to other planets, but it is pretty key to actually making things being, wet and wild over here. Alright. So anyways, yeah, so with that, back to the video.
It doesn't really break down, doesn't really react, so even though it may seem counterintuitive, quite often when you want an unreactive ion in solutions you use perchlorate because it doesn't oxidize or reduce or really interact very much at all. Perchloric acid is also a very strong, useful acid used in a lot of scenarios, and ammonium perchlorate in particular is often used in rocket fuel, so a lot of solid rocket motors are based.
Perchloric acid is its own extremely dangerous and horrifying beast, but that's we're getting off topic there. I will come back to that maybe another time.
On ammonium perchlorate. So perchlorates are widely used and are very good. In fact, some would say they are the perfect ion with absolutely no downsides.
Who needs your thyroid?
Except for that one thing. Sure, your body thinks that this is iodine and it will send it to your thyroid because it thinks it's super.
That's, okay, smelling like farts like sulfuric acid does. That's an interesting interpretation of the smell of sulfuric, and I have to smell sulfuric fairly often for my job as a, lab inspector. If that's what it smells like to you, then I guess it kind of makes sense. It does have the sulfur in there, but yeah. It does not. I don't think it does. It's just very acrid, strong, and burning your nostrils. Oh, and the bit he's doing here is that, yeah, I can explain this real quick too, so... Your body's not exactly the smartest. Actually, this would be a good place to draw this. Your body is not exactly the smartest, and it thinks that the perchlorate ion is basically the same thing as iodine. Oh, I have my array. Wait, what? I have something selected? Why is it not drawing? Oh, because it's not visible. Oops. Okay. Your body kind of thinks... this perchlorate ion and iodine are basically the same thing, and that's why you have health complications, and that's basically because, imagine the circle I'm making is actually representative of the ion size, so the perchlorate's roughly that large, so is the iodine. Iodine's also roughly that large too, so your body's just kind of like, well, that has -1 charge on both of these ions, they're about the same size, and so they just... Your body's like, yeah, fuck it, pass it along. That's iodine, baby. Yeah, I mean, if your sulfuric acid does smell that bad and it's discolored, there might be a lot of sulfur contamination. I did actually find it work once. There was a bottle of, someone had mixed sulfuric and nitric acid and was storing it as sulfonitric acid. And not only was it kind of causing some damage to the nearby chemicals because the lid was vented because that's a gas-generating mixture, the entire bottle was also notably covered in sulfur because I pulled my gloves away and, like, there's a small, like, yellow stain on it, and, like, it definitely smelled pretty bad. So, labs think, it's fine. I need to throw it away. It's fine. Chap has a hood to get rid of the toxic fumes. Yeah, good. You should be having the fume hoods and stuff. Kind of like Blood and CO, but not exactly. Blood and CO is actually a really interesting... I know we're already a little bit diverted off topic here, but, like, Blood and CO is really interesting just because of, like... Yeah, carbon monoxide really back bonds with the heme... the heme group of the hemoglobin. So it's kind of like... A very, very simplified kind of way of thinking of this is that first, you have like a direct bond that's kind of happening between the electrons of the carbon here and the iron over here. And then what also happens is that there is other orbitals where the electron density is. And then that overlaps with this, the pi system that is what these double bonds are representing. And so you have electrons going one way from the carbon to the iron, and then you have electrons coming back from the iron to the carbon-oxygen system. And so carbon monoxide slowly asphyxiates and poisons you because this is what oxygen's normally supposed to do. But reversibly, this is so strong, it doesn't really come off very quickly. So you are likely to just... You can literally breathe, but you cannot respire. You can keep moving your lungs in and out, but your body's not taking up oxygen because the CO won't move its ass out of the way. That's the short version of it anyways. Oh, bio major, I see.
iodine and it's not, and you die. Okay, but that one kind of feels like it's a fault of your body. Your body can like tell the difference between like, oh, this protein is slightly different. Oh, there's 3 atoms different in this 3,000 mega. The second you have this perchlorate ion, it's like your body's like, that's fucking iodine. No, it's not iodine. It's not iodine. Ruining the perfect fucking ion.
Tom speaks so much truth there. The body is so dumb. It somehow knows the difference between one amino acid being changed and all of a sudden the protein stops working because the structure is different. But if, God forbid, you have iodine be the same size as perchlorate, your body just like, I don't know what to do anymore, man. It's so confusing.
If we have perchlorates featuring high oxidation state chlorine, we should have perbromates featuring high oxidation state bromine. I mean, we have
chloride, chlorine, hypochlorites, chlorates, and perchlorates.
And we also have
bromide, bromine, bromides, hyperbromites, bromates.
But no perbromates. And it confused scientists. All the other ions were well known. It was pretty odd to have this glaring gap, especially a strong oxidizer. In the early 1960s, they were putting anything in rockets. They were using any rocket fuel they could possibly dream of.
So to
like have
ozone
a bromine
shit.
analog of perchlorates, that would make sense in a rocket. There was 2 possible reasons no one was able to isolate perbromates. The first option was it was just not stable. You could put that 4th oxygen on the bromine, but it would just fall apart. The bromine doesn't want to be in the +7 oxidation state, and you're putting too much oxygen around it, so it's just not stable. The other option is it's just very, very difficult to make. So you have 3 oxygens around the bromine as the bromate, and you want to go to...
I guess something to point out for the less chemistry inclined in the audience. These two are technically different statements. There are some things that you can form very easily, but then once they form, they're like, okay, I explode now, and then they don't want to exist. Then there are other things where if you get them to form, they will stay, but they, actually getting them to that point is the difficult part. I guess part B, the way of saying part B is that it's hard to get over the initial energy hill to go from reagents to product, and then option A is, well, it's easy to get from reagents to product. That energy hill is low. But you know what's even lower? The next energy hill of it decomposing into something entirely different. Or reacting with, like, the air, let's say.
Difficult to make. So you have 3 oxygens around the bromine as the bromate, and you want to go to perbromate, and it just takes a tremendous amount of energy to put that 4th oxygen on. But once you've done that, the molecule is stable. So do you try and add it in really slowly at cold temperatures, or do you try and blast it with, whatever you possibly can to try and add that 4th oxygen on? This is when we meet the hero of our story, a chemist in the 1960s from Illinois. Not Germany this time. There's been
home state?
Saturation of German chemistry on this channel recently, so we'll see how far we can get without involving any German chemistry in this video. Dr. Evan Appelman, in 1968, is working in Illinois in a national laboratory under the US Department of Energy. And he has a brilliant idea. What if we don't even try to do chemistry to make perbromate? What if we just will it into existence? He takes selenium, irradiates it with neutrons, thanks US Department of Energy in the 1960s, then makes the selenate, and in a little while, the selenium decomposes radioactively into bromine. Hey!
That's brilliant and cheating. It's not chemistry, but honestly, I respect the hell out of that. That's a funny way to try to make things. I kind of wish I was able to do more radiochemistry in my time of actually doing research, but how dangerous it is and how expensive probably wouldn't have happened, but that's a funny way of thinking about it. So it's just, it's alchemy, sort of, basically. That's the kind of thing that gets taught in Gen Chem, where it's like, well, if you want to transmute the different elements, it's like, oh shit, you do radiochemistry. That's awesome. I'd love to hear more about it sometime. Yeah, basically the joke in freshman year chemistry is that if you're transforming your elements, that's alchemy, and boom, look at this, nuclear decay and fission, forming new elements from other elements. Bam, that's alchemy. The alchemists of yore were just a couple hundred years too early, and one nuclear reactor too early as well. They didn't have that in the tech tree yet.
he's got perbromate. This process does not make very much perbromate, but it shows him
probably
that
not.
it's stable and reveals to him a constant horror of experimental science, which is sometimes the answer to experimental problems is just to try a little harder. It's a terrifying thought. He does 2 initial methods to make small amounts of perbromates. Actually, the term he uses in a later paper I really like. He refers to it as a ponderable amount of perbromates. I like that, just enough to ponder on. He does an electrochemistry
also
ponderable amount of perbromate.
Is basically what your body's doing when it's thinking, is this iodine or is this perchlorate? Let me ponder this orb for a while.
I like that, just enough to ponder on. He does an electrochemistry route, which is not very efficient. He basically bashes all these ions together and searches through the rubble and finds a bit of perbromate. And then he uses xenon difluoride, a very, very strong oxidizer, which is a bit of a flex, actually. This is 1968, and xenon difluoride was only discovered in 1962, so it feels like he's just flexing that he's
new chemical to make new chemical.
I think he's an expert in like xenon and fluorine chemistry in the US at the time. So he tries this brand new exotic reagent. It works to make perbromates. He publishes the single author paper, continues on, and then does a better synthesis using fluorine gas. Once again, a bit of a flex that he's got fluorine gas. He can make perbromate salts, he can make perbromic acid, but because of the difficulty in the synthesis and the dangers involved and the high cost, perbromates don't find industrial use anywhere.
I mean, this entire synthesis is basically predicated on the fact that this guy is working at a national lab with, all the most modern chemistry resources in the world, a 1960s federal government that is really willing to go into energetics research. Oh, hello, new subscriber. Who is that? I might have missed the notification there. Damn it, I'm not good at this. I didn't have my my preview up. Well, sorry about that. I would love to actually respond and call your name, but I missed the damn thing. But it's predicated entirely on the fact that he's working in the 60s. He has all the chemicals available to him. He has more money than God, and all of the equipment needed to actually do highly reactive chemistry. Like, this is just absolutely impossible to do without the full chemical weight of the US government behind you. So, yeah, of course, perbromates are not actually going to become a practical use case kind of thing. But yeah, brief explainer too. Fluorine, usually a good way to make a weaker oxidizer, is extremely strong oxidizer. Fluorine gas and xenon difluoride are some of the strongest oxidizers known because of that. Fluorine being the most electronegative element known, and the FF bond is pretty tenuous. Both of those fluorines want the electron, and they don't like being together very much, so they're gonna attach to things and steal electrons from other stuff. It's great. And the xenon difluoride is xenon's just bridging that in a more solid form. It's still a very weak bond.
Even Appleman himself, a fluorine expert, says this procedure is reasonably dangerous. You can't use platinum tubing for the synthesis because it interrupts with the perbromate formation, so they have to use Teflon. But there's a note in the paper that sometimes the Teflon just catches on fire, so, that's cool. And also, this is a brand new ion in the universe.
Yeah, fluorine will catch almost anything on fire.
Before you can use it industrially, you have to at least have some idea of its toxicity, because your body probably...
Do you? I don't know if industry gives a shit if it's toxic or not. They'll just, pump that straight into the waterways if it makes them shareholder value.
Thinks this is another important ion and will hyperaccumulate it in another organ. So before any industrial use, you've got to find a mouse willing to volunteer to eat its body weight in it. So there's no one stupid enough to spend all this time, money, effort, and resources to make perbromate-based pyrotechnic mixtures.
Until today.
Okay, so we have to make perbromates here in my shed. How do we do it?
In
Build a
my
fluorine
fucking
generator.
shed?
I'll just generate some fluorine. No, we're not building a fluorine generator. We can't do it.
But why?
What other options do we have? There is electrochemistry, but electrochemistry isn't real. It's just a made-up science for wizards. Whatever. We're never going to get any good results from electrochemistry. I mean, even the Appleman wizard himself doesn't get good results from electrochemistry. So we're not doing electrochemistry. So that leaves us with...
Electrochemistry is also one of those things that's just it does solve a lot of problems as a home chemist, where it's you want to use, there are people who I want to make I want to make perchlorate salts of my own at home. Well, if I could just oxidize some chlorine stuff, or yeah, if I can oxidize chlorine stuff, and it's get the perchlorates out of there, or I want to like get sodium metal at home. I can reduce sodium hydroxide, super common. Like, yeah, battery alchemy via electrochemistry is great. It's just that it's this awful setup of like, I need to get my electrodes, I need to know my physics, I need to do a lot of math, I need to be able to basically dispose of extremely fairly hazardous like waste and salts and set up something. Like, it's too much engineering for like your average chemist who just wants to throw things in a pot and then leave. Like, I am not saying I'm above that. I've never done electrochemistry myself. It sucks. Just doing the math for it on paper. I don't really want to do it in person either. But it's a shame too, because it's so good at actually getting like impractical practical problems and reactions done. Hello, Grim. Welcome. Bears finished his faith playthrough. Nice. Glad you were able to help him. I remember catching the previous stream of that, and it was pretty funny watching them go through the game. Yeah. We're in the middle of the perbromate pyrotechnic video. I explained how this perbromate salt is so unstable, and Tom just explained the background of how you basically had to have the entire budget and resources of the United States government during the 1960s to make this chemical because of how horribly unstable and reactive it is.
Xenon difluoride.
Oh no, he's actually going for it.
Xenon difluoride. It's a pretty dangerous chemical, but also the bigger issue is a legit seller is not going to sell me this dangerous, extremely expensive.
Not going to get it from the hardware store, no.
And it's not something that's going to appear on the black market. Like, I'm not going to get xenon difluoride off the black market. The grey market, though. It turns out all I had to do was send Bitcoin to
Hello, Bear. Welcome.
Eastern Europe, and he would post me xenon difluoride.
God bless Eastern Europe. It's the best place to get old hazardous chemicals that was dug out of a 1960s Soviet laboratory that got abandoned. Nobody actually bothered to watch what the fuck was happening there. So many good chemicals come out of the Eastern Europe that people want because no one else in their right mind would manufacture it and ship it to a random consumer. About to head off because he had a long day. Hey, no problem, Proto. Thanks for showing up and having fun with us.
I mean, it was actually peak COVID times, so they couldn't directly ship it from Eastern Europe to Australia because of some shipping shutdown. So quick shout out to Elias Experiments for facilitating this xenon difluoride.
Also means this video's been in the work for like 5 to 6 years.
Through Germany, which I don't think is a crime, but also technically is help from a German chemist for this video, but he didn't do any chemistry for it, so I'm letting that one slide, all right? Anyway, it arrived, and here I have 1 gram of xenon difluoride that I'm unboxing, and you might be able to tell this was a little while ago. So what happened? Well, I got scared a little. I was a bit scared.
I wouldn't want to work with xenon difluoride either.
Is a strong oxidizer, but that's not the real
at least
scary
outside of a
part
glove
about it.
box.
The scary bit is the fluorine. Xenon difluoride is very reactive and will react with water to produce xenon and hydrofluoric acid. And it's so reactive that it will do this on contact with water in the air. Hydrofluoric acid is extremely dangerous. It's a small molecule and it can permeate through your skin where it interrupts the calcium signaling by precipitating out calcium fluoride in your bloodstream. It kills your nerves. The blood gets all lumpy and you have a heart attack and die. It's very...
Yeah, so I guess, well, for a little bit of the jargon, so precipitating in chemistry terms basically means a, let me close this real quick. Yeah, precipitating basically means taking some kind of material that is in solution, so let's say aqueous, adding something to it, typically also a liquid or also aqueous solution, and then that causes some form of this, let's call it AB, to come out as a solid material. So when he's saying the fluorine would cause calcium to precipitate out of your blood, it's basically saying this. You have some calcium in your blood because of movement between blood cells and bone marrow and all that stuff, because your bones are mostly calcium. Combining with 2 fluoride ions from that hydrofluoric acid that burned your skin away. This forms insoluble calcium fluoride. And so now you have little crystals floating inside of your veins. Awesome. My job had in their SOP only work with HF if you're within screaming distance of a colleague. Yeah, that's a pretty accurate statement to make. I'm not gonna lie. I would say, God, don't only do it if you're even in less distance than that. If you're in talking distance of a colleague, I wouldn't want to be anywhere near alone if working with HF. It's one of those few materials that will strike fear into the heart of any chemist, no matter what kind of crazy shit they work with. That's like one of the far end extremes of like, you should not be ever using this chemical unless you absolutely have to. And then you have people in nanoengineering that are like, I'm going to use HF to etch away my silica discs and my silicon discs, and it's like they barely even know what chemical hazards are, and they're just like, this is a tool, I'm going to use it, it's going to be fine. And then you have to be like, no, please have some self-preservation.
Bad. Your skin does a good job of keeping hazards on the outside of your inside body where you kind of live, I guess. It does not manage that with hydrofluoric acid. That's a bad thing. There are some horrifically
no way is getting fluorine out of the body
about hydrofluoric acid necrosis, which I'm not going to put up here, but when I've used hydrofluoric acid in an academic environment, it's the only chemical where you have to mandatorily have someone else conduct the activity with you just to stand there and call the ambulance if you spill it. Also, even though it's a solid, xenon difluoride has a reasonable vapor pressure and apparently smells very bad. So I think, and rightfully so, I was a little bit scared to open this box.
It has that ozone-like odor, meaning that it smells like pennies because your nose is going to be bleeding a little bit if you inhale too much of it.
And apparently smells very bad. So I think, and rightfully so, I was a little bit scared to open this bottle of xenon difluoride. As a consequence, the box containing the xenon difluoride sat in my car. It was in the back of my car for about 4 years.
Oh my God, I'm betting on the fact that this xenon difluoride, xenon difluoride is barely a stable component or chemical as is. It as mentioned, it likes to evaporate very easily, but also like it is just not terribly stable. It wants to oxidize with anything and react with everything. If you just leave it in a car for 4 years, I'm pretty sure the heat and atmospheric like little bit of water that gets into the container and all the heat making it want to react with like the whatever it was shipped in, like that he wasted the xenon difluoride. He wasted the whatever 0.0052 Bitcoin he had to send. I am betting he had to buy another batch of this stuff for like the same amount of money. If it's good quality still over all that time, I'll be shocked, but be happy for him.
I think I was giving someone a lift and they're like, what's in this box? And I was like, oh fuck. Whoops. In my defense, my car does kind of look like a corrosive cabinet and it already had rust holes for ventilation before I stored the corrosive in it. So
I should fix it. I say that every couple of years, but I really should fix that.
I guess it's fine. I don't know. Can you imagine if my car got broken into during the 4 years I just had a box of fucking xenon difluoride in it? Some guy.
Fuck having a carbon monoxide leak in your car. Xenon difluoride leak. Let's go. It doesn't smell like choking. It smells like pennies.
Opens it and it's just fucking a lethal dose of a fluorine. Anyway, we move on. This year, I don't know what came over me, but I plucked up the courage to finally open the container. Actually, I think what came over me was the thought that it had probably all decomposed anyway. It's got some vapor pressures. It's probably all left.
Hey, welcome, Ilvo.
I probably wasted this money.
We're talking about man making unstable perbromate compounds being this big material with the BR in the middle of it here. And in order to do so, he had to order highly oxidizing chemicals from Eastern Europe, and he left it in his car for 4 years because he was scared to open it, which, fair, but also, yeah, I can't believe this might still even be of decent quality. We're about to find out.
finally opened the container. Actually, I think what came over me was a thought that it had probably all decomposed anyway. It's got some vapor pressure, so it's probably all left the package. I probably wasted this money a long time ago and nothing will come out of it, but I might as well open it now. It looks pretty well sealed. I mean, okay.
Yeah, it's a
right.
Teflon. I could see maybe it being okay.
See some water droplets on the inside.
That's not
of the
good.
packaging.
If there's water
did I say
inside.
Water? I meant hydrofluoric acid droplets. That's great. Sure.
Yeah, so I guess to explain the chemistry on that one a little bit. So let me get this drawn right. So we have xenon difluoride. Back to kind of what we were talking about with proto earlier. It's like you have your oxygen. Well, I don't actually know what the mechanism is, so I'm not going to really pretend. But you end up having these two react, and what happens is that the fluorine wants to pick up these hydrogens, giving the oxygen its electrons back, and so you end up getting a net products of HF, bone-hurting, dissolve your flesh off acid, plus some xenon gas floating away, and I'm guessing probably also some oxygen as well. So, yeah, this is not. It's not only his material could fall apart if just exposed to humidity. It also creates extremely toxic acid that will not only melt away your skin, but give you blood poisoning.
The xenon difluoride is stored in this small Teflon vial, which I've never seen before, but it's needed because the xenon difluoride is reactive enough to react with glass, so it wouldn't be able to be stored in a glass ampule.
Oh yeah, and then for those not knowledgeable, Teflon is typically a Teflon is typically a polymer of multiple carbon atoms with all the hydrogens replaced with fluorine along the backbone. So you end up having the reason this ends up being highly resistant to xenon difluoride and lots of other fluorine things is because, well, it's already chock full of fluorine. You really can't add too much else. Sure, you could break some of the carbon bonds and add fluorines there, but, well, that takes a whole lot of doing at that point, so it ends up being fairly robust.
It would just etch through it. I could tell the container wasn't empty as soon as I opened it because, man, that smell hit me. Whoa. The smell is like you made some really hot peppermint and spearmint tea, but you put 8 tea bags of spearmint tea in, and instead of water, you used hot bleach. That's what it smells like, but not really. It's very distinctive, but not very pleasant. Once we get past the horrendous smell and the danger, these crystals are beautiful. It is amazing to have a compound of a noble gas that's just stable
White
like
crystals.
this, and these huge, beautiful crystals. This is a side note, but if we're trying to make an expensive and obscure oxidizer, could we just use xenon difluoride as our expensive and obscure oxidizer? Ooh, that's a big lump. Yeah, well, I mean, we can use it in pyrotechnic mixtures if you just accept the fluorine danger.
I wonder if anyone's ever actually recorded this reaction before. Huh! Look at that. Well, actually, something... I wonder if he's going to mention it. Something he probably should have considered when doing that. He likes to stage a lot of his combustion reactions on aluminum foil because it's easy to get and typically pretty resistant to reactions, but, like, xenon difluoride is definitely strong enough to oxidize aluminum. It might have just been reacting with the aluminum as well. I mean, you saw the white flash of the fire. That's very indicative of a magnesium fire, but it's a little bit of an interfering factor.
Yeah, xenon difluoride does work for flash powder mixtures. The cool bit about it, though, is you see this blue glow, and I've never seen this blue glow from a pyrotechnic mixture before, and I believe it's the xenon gas getting ionized as it's being created and heated up and everything like that. So that's the ionization light from the xenon, which is very, very cool. Such a waste of an expensive oxidizer. No, not a waste. It's important. It's important science. It's important science. All right, but let's get...
Yeah, like a fucking $400 experiment demonstration just with that alone.
Serious, we need to weigh out 0.5 gram of xenon difluoride, which we will use to oxidize a small amount of sodium bromate. The sodium bromate I made from sodium bromide, which I got from the hardware store, and I just made it to sodium bromate in an electrochemical cell, but oxidizing it to perbromate takes a lot of xenon difluoride, and we're going to be doing it in an aqueous solution. You would think it would react straight away, but the xenon difluoride does actually dissolve into the solution and react and oxidize things there, as well as break down into hydrofluoric acid and xenon. We know this.
Okay, so the reaction that's taking place is going to be, let's see, sodium bromate. Now we're actually finally getting to the meat and potatoes of how do we make this thing that we're setting out to make here. So we have sodium bromate, xenon difluoride. That's going to be reacting to make sodium perbromate. Sodium perbromate plus... Let's see, we're going to get the HF when we react with the water. We're going to get some not xenon oxides, but some oxygen. Let's see. Okay, so this is actually kind of an interesting reaction then, because the goal is to add another oxygen onto this bromine, but obviously you can see our oxidizer does in fact not have any oxygen on it. So, and I'm guessing what's happening here, and was maybe about to explain with this, is that we're probably going to get, we're either going to have like a transient xenon oxide kind of species form after the water goes in and attacks the xenon difluoride, like I was kind of showing here, and maybe misrepresented. Well, it'll definitely turn to oxygen in its final form, but you might end up having like some kind of oops, wrong layer. You might end up having some kind of like random xenon bonded to oxygen some number of times kind of structure here in the middle that then breaks down into these down here. So you're either going to have that in solution, or you're going to have probably some oxygen radicals forming in solution, so that being an oxygen that is basically just the elemental atomic form of the element. Normally oxygen is found as dioxygen, but with two, of these oxygen atoms come together and love each other very much, they would form, an oxygen molecule. But maybe you can get some oxygen radicals just for a little bit of time in solution, and then those would append onto the bromine up here, and that would form your final perbromate product. Let's see if he explains it any further.
Once again, thanks to Appleman from the early 1970s and his work on xenon difluoride in solution. So shout out to him once again, Illinois.
Yeah, Illinois!
My
home state.
We just have this deathly solution of xenon difluoride and bromate stirring in this Teflon beaker.
Not
in ice
all
water,
extremely dangerous.
And nothing really seems to happen. There's a little bit of bubbling at the bottom, and that's some oxygen and some xenon, but it's not a whole lot happens here. Now, after all this stirring, we theoretically have made some perbromate, but that doesn't really mean much to us unless we can isolate a solid sample of a pure perbromate salt. So we got to get rid of all these other ions in there. There's bromide, bromate.
Yeah, so how do we get rid of this
xenon
crap?
And fluoride, so we need to get rid of them first. The reference we're going to use to try and extract a pure perbromate salt is from Appleman himself, the original synthesis paper from 1968. So to start with, we're going to add some calcium hydroxide. This will do two things. Firstly, it will get rid of the vast majority of the fluoride ions, which are going to be removed as calcium fluoride, but also it will neutralize this hydrofluoric acid and get rid of these fluoride ions, which will make it safer.
Yeah, the calcium hydroxide. It's doing the thing that we explained earlier. It's like, this is why it's bad for your blood. Where is it? Yeah, here we go. Now we're actually utilizing this chemistry to be like, oh, hey, look at that. We're getting the fluoride out of solution, and we're also going ahead and neutralizing all the HF that's present. Nice.
So it's a good first step to do. It's going to make this whole solution a lot safer to be around. Calcium fluoride is a colorless solid, so we're not expecting to see any color here. So I have no idea why it just decides to go pink. But the idea is to add just enough calcium hydroxide to neutralize most of the fluoride ions, but not make the solution too basic, because then we're going to dissolve.
I have no idea why it's pink either.
It's just another contaminant ion. We don't want it to be there. The next chemical we need to add...
The only thing I could think of for maybe a reason of something being pink is like you have some weird xenon species that something in solution is like turning into like a calcium xenon, a xeno8 or something like that, and it's just kind of like having some weird charge transfer where it's like, well, the calcium's 2+, and then this thing is like some number of minus, and it's like it's just very unusual atoms binding to each other, so it's just like color, I guess, maybe.
Is a silver salt, and the idea of this is the silver is going to bind to the bromate and the bromide and precipitate them out, but silver perbromate is soluble, so any spare silver is not going to precipitate out any perbromate. Again, we're not expecting it to go any color, so it just goes black, and this seems wrong. I probably added too much calcium hydroxide. I felt like the pH was wrong, so I added in some hydrobromic acid to try and make it just
So we're trying to also get, I think he said, adding silver to any excess of this left. So adding silver ions would cause the silver bromate to fall out of solution as a solid, so we could filter that off.
Bit more acidic, and I'm adding this in until I see silver bromide start precipitating out, which is a white solid, so naturally it turns yellow, and even when it's stirring, some of the stuff that's splashed on the sides goes a vibrant green color, which I have no idea what that was about. It's not a great sign, but all of these solids should now be able to be filtered out, and we've removed our fluoride, our bromide, and our bromate, and just left with our perbromate in solution. To make sure that none of these contaminants make it through to our end product, I also ran the solution through the centrifuge to make sure that all those light, fluffy fluoride solids definitely get separated out from the solution containing our perbromate ion. To recover perbromate, we just need to make up a solution of a cesium salt, because cesium perbromate, like cesium perchlorate, is very insoluble. When we add our cesium solution to our supposed perbromate solution, we get, for the first time, a white solid. But I wasn't convinced, and I was right to not be convinced, because there's just way too much solid. And one way we can test if it actually is the thing we want is by making this solution again acidic. I don't know why it stopped being acidic, but we can again add some hydrobromic acid. Maybe that solid was cesium bromate, maybe it was cesium hydroxide, but neither of them are stable at low pH. So by making it acidic, we cancel out all those other ions. But there is still a tiny amount of crystals still in solution.
Are some flecks.
And when we cool it down and get it so cold that it basically freezes, we do have some crystals. It is a little bit off yellow, which is not a great sign, but running this...
I mean, for a reaction whose paper basically says you're going to get this in a 2% yield, that's pretty damn good. That's a success.
Solids through the centrifuge, there's definitely a heavier crystalline solid and just a small amount of yellowish powder, which I think is maybe some silver fluoride that made it all the way through. So, much to my genuine surprise, we have made actual cesium perbromate here in my shed. It's not very much. I mean, it is a ponderable amount.
All it took to get a ponderable amount of cesium perbromate in his shed was ordering an extremely expensive and hazardous chemical, but one that was laboratory grade from Eastern Europe, instead of trying to make it at home in true, bootstrapping fashion.
87 milligrams.
But it's enough to ponder one pyrotechnic mixture.
All right, I've got 87 milligrams of perbromate and 11 milligrams of sugar.
We're just going to do it all in one?
The ratio's right, because we've got one shot at this. One shot. Let's get this mixed up.
I mean, I guess he doesn't have very much, but like, that's bold. Well, that did in fact go up in flames.
So yeah, we did it. We pondered perbromate pyrotechnics, but...
Alright, well, why was that good?
I just couldn't stop pondering, you know? What's the point of it all? was it a pointless perbromate pyrotechnic? Could we have made a better mixture? Was it even really proper perbromate? Was the real perbromate the friends we made along the way? What's... Didn't feel very satisfying. So... I think we have to go to our last resort. I said I wouldn't, but we gotta do it. Let's involve a German chemist. The second hero of our story here is Niels. Niels is studying his PhD in chemistry over in Germany, but more importantly, he is a supporter of Explosions&Fire on Patreon. So when I posted, hey, I'm thinking about making these perbromates, this obscure compound that basically no one had, he messaged like, oh yeah, I'm just doing my PhD on that. I believe he's using them for a silicon etchant for semiconductors.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But to do that, he needs to make them because no one's got perbromates. Niels is doing the classic good perbromate synthesis using fluorine gas, which he's able to do in Professor Krause's lab, and he's actually doing it really well and managed to scale it up to a large amount and has...
If you're the kind of person who says, yeah, I can make my PhD in fluorine chemistry, you are quite possibly one of the scariest individuals I have met. You have some kind of gonads of steel. I would not, and I love hazardous chemicals. I would not be working with fluorine gas.
Has made new purification techniques that would have been really useful for me if I had thought about it, and I wouldn't have to do all this stupid ion exchange stuff because it just apparently you can just recrystallize it from acetone. But anyway, he's writing up a paper. And
hold on, let me read that reference a little further then. The dried salt mixture, sodium perbromate was obtained in a mixture of sodium salts by elemental fluorine oxidation of an aqueous sodium bromate solution. As described by Appleman. The dried salt mixture was extracted with acetone. The extract was evaporated to dryness at room temperature. The resulting solid, which principally is sodium perbromate, was dissolved in water. The solution was slowly evaporated at room temperature to produce clear crystals of sodium perbromate hydrate. Huh, no shit. I mean... Okay, I guess a good reason he didn't just add acetone to his mixture of ions was that, well, you could have just had this whole total mixture of random crap. But, I guess with this fluorine synthesis, then, yeah, fuck it, just add acetone right to the solution, and the salts are not going to be able to stay within there anymore. They're no longer soluble.
Apparently you can just recrystallize it from acetone. But anyway, he's writing up a paper and should soon be published about the good synthesis of perbromates, which is probably very overdue. But that's not why Niels is a hero. Niels is a hero because he said, yeah, I'll send you some. Whatever. I'll send you a whole damn gram of perbromate. Now, don't get greedy. 1 gram doesn't look like a lot compared to these big pictures of a lot of perbromate, but he sent this 1 gram.
This professor probably had to, unless he randomly was the professor who, himself was a supporter of the channel, but otherwise he had to convince his professor, yeah, let me just send a gram of this highly specialized research material to this YouTube guy.
Before he'd worked out these large-scale procedures when there were hardly any grams of perbromate in the world, and he was like, here's a whole gram of perbromate. So we have here some official cesium perbromate in my hands.
It's pretty special.
Once again, test some perbromate pyrotechnics. Let's go!
Grinding the perbromate? Okay. A little bold. I mean, I guess it's not extremely energetic, but still, not stable.
So we'll light it from the cesium.
Ooh, side by side.
Whoa, the perbromate is fantastic. That's sick. Okay, this one is 100 milligrams perbromate.
Not quite sure what happened there, but
10 milligrams sulfur. More traditional flash recipe that I won't.
Way to just waste the fucking expensive, extremely specialized chemical that you have, Tom. Just get it all over the paper.
Spill. That kind of sucked.
Yeah, burn the paper. Get some more fire. Why not?
Here I have 150 milligrams of perbromate, 15 milligrams of hexamine, and this is 10 to 15 milligrams of hafnium powder, obviously.
Huh. It's an interesting mixture. I guess this is just something that is normally, I guess, a powerful with perchlorate, so.
Sure.
He's using his fucking Cubane. Okay, so for those unfamiliar with the channel, he he has like a several years long running series that tried to make this cube molecule. So it ends up looking like this, where every corner point is a carbon. He tried to make something that looks like this with, let's see, methyl esters at either side. Took a couple years to make even a small amount of impure material of this, and he's still currently spending time trying to scale up the reaction to make several grams worth of it. That's very funny to see him cross the project streams like that. Which this itself should be a pretty energetic fuel, just because this cage of carbon in the middle is a little bit structurally strained, so it's not super inclined to want to stay together. It would be very happy to snap apart, put it that way.
Ooh.
And hey, gets the best reaction out of it too.
It's good, but it's not as good as perchlorates. It's just like a heavier, badder version of perchlorates, and we already have perchlorates. I don't think that's good. Is that really the point? No, I know what the point is. Last year, I got the chance to go to Germany, and you know who was there? Niels. I got to have a beer with Niels. So, surprise, the point of the Perbromate is the friends we make along the way. It doesn't matter that Perbromate sucks, because I got to buy him a beer. Well, I mean, actually, it was a cash-only bar, and I didn't realize that there was a cash-only bar. So technically, he bought the beer. He actually bought 4 beers for me, actually, because they kept asking, and I didn't have any money.
So the streamer keeps getting money, huh? And doesn't repay the community back.
He had to drive about 4 hours to meet me, to buy me all the beers, and I'm not a good friend.
This video is sponsored.
Alright, I will be right back. We will be doing maybe 1 or 2 more reaction videos for the night, depending on how long I stall and watch these kinds of things for. I do need to go take my usual stream pee break, so I will be back in just a moment. Enjoy more Mega Man music for a couple of minutes here. Right. And we're back. Now, we're going to move on from, that partially energetic experience. It's a little bit of a shame. It was a little bit more disappointing than, there wasn't as much explosion and fire as, one might hope for, but it was still an entertaining delve into a lot of interesting science, so I'm happy to have, it's a good video as always. Let's get back to it, and I'll bring the screen back up here. Alright. Chat's gone for some reason. That's odd. Don't know why. But hopefully it wasn't just like a weird stream reset thing in the background. Either way, we're moving on from, you know, funny shitposty chemistry more towards a little bit of serious chem history, I guess. So this is Chemistorian. This is a channel I don't watch super often, but it's one that I do enjoy because he does the guy does a pretty good job of talking about the history of chemistry, as the name implies, and usually comes up with some pretty interesting topics that are both approachable for people not super familiar with chemistry, but also fairly niche topics that maybe even those well into chemistry might not be aware of. So let's go. This is a beautiful box that saved chemistry. I'm guessing it has something to do with the spectra of various atoms, which I'll explain if that ends up being the topic of the video, but seems like it might be something about, like, how did we figure out what the spectra of each atom was?
This video is sponsored by Radiocode. In 1862, the French Academy of Sciences published a report that contained a groundbreaking idea. However, nobody paid attention to it, and it went largely unnoticed for many years.
As all great science does.
The idea described in this paper would become one of the most important fundamental concepts in all of science. This is the story of how the newest science in the world, chemistry, went from being a disorganized mess where nobody could agree on anything to the scientific juggernaut that it is today.
It genuinely is impressive how chemistry used to just be a bunch of, like, Kingsmen fucking around in, like, a space with, like, acids trying to make gold, and nobody knew what the hell was happening. They just knew that certain things could be combined to create other things. And then atomic theory got discovered, and all of a sudden everybody knew exactly what the hell they were doing with all of these chemicals. It's pretty fun, not gonna lie. You gotta respect it.
The craziest things about this story is that this revolutionary
such a new science
wasn't even written by a chemist. It was written by a French geologist called Alexandre.
Geologists? Those are fake chemists. They eat all their chemicals.
At the time. To understand his paper and its significance, we need to go back a couple of years. You see, although there had been a huge amount of progress over the previous century, including Antoine Lavoisier's establishment of the definition of an element, and John Dalton's introduction of atomic theory as just a couple of examples, by the mid-1800s...
This maybe feels like something I should know as a chemist, but I kind of wonder how Lavoisier managed to understand and define what an element was without an actually strong knowledge of atomic theory. Like, they barely had the concept of the atom mapped out yet. Like, Dalton introduced, like, the second model of the atom that was slightly more complicated than you know, this previous, like, plum pudding model. Like, they would have no way of visualizing atoms. They would just say, like, well, you know, this thing can't be destroyed or changed further. It's fundamental, so I guess it's an element on its own. But it's like, how do you even determine that? I mean, I guess the spectroscopy will probably help, but still, it's mind-boggling how early scientists managed to do so much with so little.
The world of chemistry really was quite chaotic. Most chemists had accepted Dalton's proposal that all of matter is made of atoms, but nobody could agree on how those atoms were arranged or how heavy they were, and this was a huge problem. You see, back in those days, chemists had no way of measuring the mass of a single atom, and they wouldn't be able to until the invention of modern mass spectrometry after the First World War. However, they did agree that hydrogen had the lightest atoms of any element, since hydrogen gas had the lowest density. So hydrogen was assigned an atomic weight of 1, and all the other elements' relative atomic weights could be calculated from there. But this is where things got complicated. Different chemists had different methods for determining these relative atomic weights.
And starting to look like, well, no, okay, it's not necessarily, never mind.
Since John Dalton was the one who first introduced atomic theory, let's take a look at how he determined the atomic weight of oxygen. The first ever mention of atomic weights was in a paper published by Dalton in 1805, where he described his investigation in which he found that, for some reason, water absorbed different amounts of different gases. Towards the end of the paper, he said, "The greatest difficulty attending the mechanical hypothesis arises from different gases observing different laws. Why does water not admit its bulk of every kind of gas alike? This question I have duly considered, and though I am not yet able to satisfy myself completely, I am nearly persuaded that the circumstance depends upon the weight and number of the ultimate particles of the several gases."
Partially right. I mean, without an understanding of atomic polarity either, there would be no way to have a discussion about how polar the water molecule is and versus how polar the gas molecule is, and getting some amount of intermolecular force interaction there. But I mean, yeah, theoretically also, your weight will also determine your London dispersion forces, which, so there's three different fundamental, well, not three different fundamental, roughly three types of intermolecular forces that people will define. They'll describe London dispersion forces, polar-polar interactions, and hydrogen bonding. Hydrogen bonding is basically just a supercharged form of polar-polar interactions, where if you have a polar molecule interacting with another polar molecule, it's like, well, the slightly positive side of this water is interacting with the slightly negative side of this other water, and so you get, decent, some decent but not a binding between these molecules, though they're not obviously forming a chemical bond itself. It's just forming like a mild attraction between two separate molecules. London dispersion forces are basically much more subtle versions of this that can happen with nonpolar molecules, and they are generally stronger as mass and electron count increases. And to explain it in a diagram is a little bit difficult, but it has to do with how well, at any given time, you can imagine electrons being equivalently distributed across a given molecule, or you could imagine them being asymmetrically distributed just due to random chance of how quantum physics wants to treat the electrons that day. And so if you end up having two things that have a lot of electrons, and there's a good chance that you could actually get some asymmetric distribution, well, the more electrons you have, the more likely you're going to have asymmetric distribution, and the more likely you're going to end up with a very weak dipole. And so you'll actually end up having these atoms connect easier to each other. So that's why your weight is going to depend on, or cause a dependency on, how much gas can be dissolved in water.
Those whose particles are lightest and single being least absorbable, and the others more according as they increase in weight and complexity.
See, I knew my shit. I didn't even read that.
The relative weights of the ultimate particles of bodies is a subject, as far as I know, entirely new. I have lately been prosecuting this inquiry with remarkable success. The principle cannot be entered upon in this paper, but I shall just subjoin the results as far as they appear to be ascertained by my experiments. Beneath, Dalton casually dropped the first ever table of relative atomic weights. But where—
Yeah, no one's ever researched this shit before. I think I'm probably the first person to actually think about this. Here's a list of numbers of atomic weights. Probably use them. I'm probably right.
Where did he get these numbers from? In Eric Sherry's book on the periodic table, he explained that Dalton used Lavoisier's data on the composition of water, namely 85% oxygen and 15% hydrogen. Assuming a formula of HO, Dalton calculated the weight of an oxygen atom to be 85/15, which equals approximately 5.5.
Yeah, there's a couple of leaps of logic there. I'm pretty sure one, water is typically an atomic mass of around 18 units, 2 of those being hydrogen, 16 being oxygen. So that ratio of weights of 85 to 15% is not correct. And then also, as we're about to get into, they might have thought water was HO instead of H2O. So we're getting real off with things now.
But wait, why was Dalton using HO as the formula for water? Well, it was well known that water was a compound of hydrogen and oxygen because when you react the two gases together, you get water and nothing else. As a part of his original atomic theory, which he published in full in 1808, Dalton included what became known as the rule of greatest simplicity. With no way of knowing how atoms combine to make molecules, he stated that nature would never be more complicated than it needed to be. So he assumed that atoms always combine in the simplest possible ratios. So, in pure elements such as hydrogen and oxygen, the atoms floated around as individual.
I might be mature, but tit for titanium 24. Anyways, no, that's actually an interesting assumption to make when you have very little information like that. To be like, yeah, I mean, Occam's razor typically was right. Nature doesn't want to be too complicated, so it's just like, fuck it. One atom of each thing combined must be a new compound, and water must be one hydrogen, one oxygen. It's crazy to think how little they knew of what organic chemistry would be and just how insane the branching of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen would get.
Individual atoms. When they combined to make binary compounds, as he called them, they would always do so in a 1-to-1 ratio. So water, being a binary compound of hydrogen and oxygen, would, according to Dalton, form in the ratio 1 hydrogen to 1 oxygen, giving it a formula of HO. For this publication, Dalton made his own measurements of the amounts of hydrogen and oxygen in water and found that the ratio was closer to 7. With these new measurements, he included an updated table of relative atomic weights.
Wait, hold on, what? Water being this, blah, blah, the relative weights of the two elementary atoms, 1 to 7. Oh, okay, so I think he's saying, like, if, yeah, splitting the water, getting the gases, measuring the weights of the oxygen to the hydrogen gas, and then making a relative weight assessment. He's still using an incorrect formula.
Of hydrogen and oxygen in water, and found that the ratio was closer to 7. With these new measurements, he included an updated table of relative atomic weights. All of this was really incredible work, but it didn't take long before other chemists began challenging Dalton's assumptions.
Began being like, this data is not actually helping
Dalton's
me.
Publication, a French chemist called Joseph-Louis Gay-Lussac took a closer look at the volumes of gases as they reacted. He found that 2 volumes of hydrogen always reacted with 1 volume of oxygen to form 2 volumes of water vapor. He observed that similar simple ratios were always present between reacting gases, and defined what he called the law of combining volumes, which stated that the ratio between the volumes of the reactant gases and the gaseous products could be expressed in simple whole numbers. Inspired by Gay-Lussac's work, in 1811, the Italian chemist Amedeo Avogadro hypothesized that since these same simple ratios could be found between all reacting gases, it follows that at the same temperature and pressure, equal volumes of any gases contain an equal number of molecules. This became known as Avogadro's law, and it would mean that Gay-Lussac's observation
also be the fundamental that would help establish the very first gas law, being the ideal gas law, where you've probably seen this formula before, PV equals nRT, where you have pressure, volume, number of molecule or moles, as we'll get to, and temperature. And one of the key assumptions of the ideal gas law is that all gases will end up taking up a volume directly proportional to the number of molecules that are actually present in that sample of gas, which is not exactly true, but for, high temperatures, it's pretty true. They just didn't know of their atomic sizes and weights, and they're figuring it out back then.
could also be interpreted as 2 molecules of hydrogen plus 1 molecule of oxygen gives 2 molecules of water. And therefore, the formula for water must actually be H2O, not HO as Dalton had proposed. This in turn would mean that Dalton's calculation for the relative atomic mass of oxygen must also be wrong. It also suggested the existence of diatomic molecules.
Yeah, they're not just simple one atoms
Dalton
flying
didn't
around.
like any of this.
Dalton's being like, no, you're
mistrustful of
my science is the correct science. How dare you say that my research is wrong? Typical chemist mindset. Hasn't changed a bit.
Work. The brilliant English chemist Humphrey Davy described Dalton as a very coarse experimenter who almost always found the results he required, trusting to his head rather than his hands. Dalton vehemently disagreed with Gay-Lussac and Avogadro's conclusions. Very little was known in these early days of atomic theory.
Disagreed. Provide no other evidence.
In this video, you'll know that it took almost a century before the Curies introduced the world to what Marie called radioactivity. But are you curious about how much radiation
this smells like a sponsor
right now?
This is a sponsor. We're moving past this.
Okay, back to the video. So, from very early on, chemists were divided about relative atomic weights and chemical formulas. Most were Team Dalton. Very few were Team Avogadro.
Oof.
A big problem was that there wasn't any direct evidence for Avogadro's law, so it just didn't gain much traction. I mean, to be fair, there wasn't any direct evidence for Dalton's rule of greatest simplicity either.
But he had the bigger
Maybe
name.
Since he was the actual founder of atomic theory, Dalton's word counted for more than Avogadro's at the time. By the way, I have an entire video all about the development of atomic theory, from the ancient Greeks to Dalton and all the way up to the atomic bomb, so I'll link that below if you want to learn more. To complicate matters further, in 1813, just 5 years after Dalton published his atomic theory, the Swedish chemist Jöns Jakob Berzelius published his own method for determining atomic weights, where he assigned oxygen an atomic weight of 100 and compared all other elements to this.
Why oxygen being
he thought
special?
That this was a
get a hold
method
of it?
because oxygen reacts with most other elements, so it's useful for finding the ratios between the masses.
That's actually a very fair way of doing
these alternate relative weights just complicated matters even further. Over the years, the confusion only grew. Different reference standards, different methods of experimentation, and different methods of calculation. Depending on whose publication you were reading, you might see different atomic weights being referred to, which led to different chemical formulas. On top of this, chemical notations and chemical nomenclature all varied massively. Here are 19 different formulas for acetic acid, which were all simultaneously being used in the mid-1800s.
Jesus Christ, that can't... That's horrid. Some of them are trying to say that, like, you have acetic acid that's just, like, a combination of fake water plus some random conglomeration of hydrocarbons plus ozone or plus an oxygen atom. And then I don't even know what the hell is going on at the very bottom here with the brackets and everything. I have no idea what someone's trying to express there. Being a chemist would have been absolute hell in that era, not knowing what anything is. I mean, the benefit is that you get to make your name in the history books for just trying shit out and hoping it works, but
They can't all be right. Which one was correct? Obviously, this was a huge problem, and the more time went on, the worse it got. In 1860, a 31-year-old German chemist
the Germans were back.
had finally had enough of the mayhem and decided that it had to be sorted out once and for all. So, he enlisted a couple of his colleagues to help him arrange something the world had never seen before. He wanted to invite all of the top chemists on the planet to come to one location
for the first chemistry
to hash out
conference.
all the major problems in chemistry, including chemical nomenclature, notation, and atomic weights. This was to be the world's first ever international scientific congress. By the way, this Kekulé character had just a couple of years earlier proposed his theory of atomic valence, which stated that different atoms always make specific numbers of bonds to other atoms. For example,
Yeah, it's
hydrogen
the
makes
fundament
1,
of organic
oxygen
chemistry.
makes 2, nitrogen makes 3, and carbon makes 4.
It's a good system for, organic chemistry. Once you get into the metals, it kind of starts falling apart as a theory, because metals can have multiple oxidation states and form fewer or more bonds to other atoms, but no, this is pretty... Kekulé was really a scientist ahead of his time. He has a lot of his ideas are still very good ideas, even in the modern age of chemistry.
Using this principle, he was able to introduce the best theory of chemical structure to date, particularly in relation to carbon-based molecules. And as such, he was one of the founders of organic chemistry.
The correct structure of
it also
benzene,
suggested
finally.
that water would indeed have a formula of H2O, not HO. My very first video on the history of chemistry talks a lot about Kekulé and his work on benzene, so I'll put a link in the description if you want to check it out. 140 of the world's most prominent chemists attended the conference, which took place in Karlsruhe, Germany. On the first day, on the 3rd of September 1860, the General Secretary of the meeting, Karl Welzin, addressed the audience and said, "For the first time, the representatives of a single scientific discipline have met, and it is the youngest science. We represent different countries and speak different languages, but we are related by our craft. We are gathered for the specific purpose of attempting, in good conscience, to prepare the way for unity on points of significance for our beautiful science."
It is actually pretty cool, the idea that you could assemble, at that point, all the chemists in the world, because there were not very many of you, and you could actually talk to everyone and just be like, okay, we're founding a new science here. We need to get our shit sorted.
Over the next 3 days, there was a lot of fierce debating between the attendees. One thing they did agree on was that the chemical notation system devised by Berzelius should be adopted. Berzelius had proposed a simple system whereby 1 to 2 letters was used to represent each element, and subscript numbers were used to indicate how many of each type of atom were present.
Superscripts.
This was a lot more practical than Dalton's original system of notation, which used different circular symbols for each element.
Yeah, that's a lot to remember. Still have to remember all of the abbreviations for each element by, letters, but at least it's letters. You know what the letters of the alphabet are. You don't have to know what the peppermint symbol means, like what element that corresponds to.
Since Dalton had passed away 16 years earlier.
Oh, well, not to be rude, but nice. We don't have to deal with that guy who hates all of the theories that end up being correct, like Gay-Lussac's law.
He wasn't around to fight for his system. By the time the third and final day of the Congress came around, the chemists hadn't agreed on much, apart from Berzelius's notation. But it was on that day that a relatively unknown Italian chemist called Stanislao Canizzaro stood up to give his input. He gave a passionate, eloquent lecture, arguing in favor of the work of his countryman, Amedeo Avogadro. He handed out reprints of a paper that he'd written a couple of years before, which hadn't received much attention at the time, but explained his arguments very
Now's
clearly.
My chance.
One attendee.
Now's my chance to actually hand out my paper to everybody. Maybe they'll read it.
The German chemist Lothar Meyer,
and it worked.
Later wrote, "I was astonished at its clarity. The little manuscript covered all the important points in dispute. It was as if scales fell from my eyes, doubts vanished, and a feeling of calm certainty came over me." Although nothing was officially agreed upon during the Congress, over the next couple of years, Canizzaro's arguments were accepted amongst the scientific community. Avogadro's law was taken as fact. Finally, chemical formulas and atomic weights were all agreed upon. For the first time, chemists were all on the same page, and the field of chemistry joined its older siblings, biology and physics, to become a unified, systematic science. Now we can get back to our French geologist, Deschamps.
And that leads to me taking
As a geologist, he got a lot of satisfaction out of
this guy got to
organizing
lick
and systematizing different minerals, and he wanted to see if he could do the same for the elements that made up those minerals. It was shortly after the Karlsruhe conference that he started working on this, and he looked into the newly established atomic weights to see if he could spot any patterns. As I said at the beginning of the video, what he found would become one of the most important fundamental concepts in all of science. Deschamps noticed that when you order all of the elements in terms of atomic weight, something interesting happens. He illustrated this with a table that was 16 relative weight units wide, and diagonal lines that repeat down the table. So here's how it works. Hydrogen has a relative atomic weight of 1, so Deschamps placed it.
Is this like the first sort of periodic table in a weird sense? It's definitely not the periodic table I'm familiar with, but there is some kind of notion of repeating, repetition with all of the elements here. being 16 wide, well, the actual periodic table is 18 rows wide, and then you also have the actinides and lanthanides at the bottom, but... Oh, that's actually interesting. We finally have some periodicity going on.
Here, 1 weight unit into the table. Next, we have lithium, which has a relative weight of 7, so its dot is here, 7 units in. Continuing all the way to oxygen, which has a relative weight of 16, we can see that it's right on the boundary of the 16-unit wide table, so it has a dot at the end of the first diagonal line and at the beginning of the second diagonal line. Following this is fluorine, with a relative weight of 19, so that's all 16 units from the first line, plus an additional 3 units on the second line.
Right, I know how math works.
He included every known element in his table and spotted something interesting. For some reason, there were several cases where elements that were very similar to each other seemed to coincidentally line up in perfect vertical columns on his table. For example, lithium, sodium, and potassium all line up one on top of the other. These elements are all reactive metals with similar properties who do the same exact reactions as each other, with the metals getting more reactive as you go down the column. It was long known that these metals were related, so much so that they already had a collective name.
Oh, that shit. A geologist makes one of the first periodic tables in the world, based off of atomic weights alone.
The properties of elements periodically repeated as you went down the table. We could even call it a periodic table.
Nah, that name will never work.
Exactly what de Chancourtois had done. He had created the first ever periodic table. De Chancourtois gave his table a name, vis tellurique, meaning telluric screw, since tellurium is located in the center. But why screw, you ask?
Well, it does kind of look like a screw.
One thing I haven't mentioned yet is that de Chancourtois designed his table to be twisted into a 3-dimensional helix. Here it is in its full glory.
Eccentric bastard.
When researching for this video, I found that the Science Museum in London had a century-old replica of the original telluric screw. After contacting them, they allowed me permission to visit their enormous storage facility to take a look at it. I saw some amazing stuff while I was there, and I'm planning on making a full video about the visit, so stay tuned for that in the near future. But the main purpose of my visit was to see the 100-year-old telluric screw, and it was beautiful.
That's cool.
Seeing it in person really took my breath away.
As a huge chem nerd myself, I would love to be able to do something like that, even if it is basically staring at a piece of paper and some old glassware. That's just like... It's like how sometimes cooking a meal in your home can connect you with, you know, if it's a meal of like your ancestral roots of your ethnicity, it can kind of connect you with like, you know, family members and that feeling of being, you know, whatever ethnicity you are and like the culture of the food. This is like connecting with like the culture of the science that you immerse yourself in so well.
It really leaves you wondering why this didn't catch on when de Chancourtois first wrote about it. Well, as it turned out, there was a problem with the original publication. The journal didn't include the diagram in the article, just a
journal failing them again.
As Eric Sherry said in his book, frustrated that the journal Compte Rendu failed to include a diagram, de Chancourtois had his system republished in 1863. But because it was published privately, this further article received even less notice from other scientists than did the original one. De Chancourtois' contribution was only fully appreciated many years later, but by that point, others had proposed their own periodic tables, including a few attendees
publishers
at the Karlsruhe Congress.
Publishers holding the scientific progress back by decades by not publishing a diagram correctly. Figures.
Such as Lothar Meyer, and a little-known chemist from Russia. Maybe you've heard of him.
Dmitry Mendeleev.
Dmitry Mendeleev.
Who is often credited with the first periodic table, but not quite accurate.
To find out what happened next. Before you go, I'd really like to ask for your help. Every one of my videos is...
Well, that was fun as hell. I would say definitely go subscribe to Chemist Story if you want to learn more actual chem history type stuff. Let's see. I know I have my periodic videos in the thumbnail to maybe do a reaction to them, but I am feeling a little bit tired at this point, and I think I'm ready to wrap things up about now for the night. So I think tomorrow, or not tomorrow, next week we can come back with Nile Red and a handful of periodic videos, and, you know, see how many we get through, and hell, maybe, I mean, I probably won't do one on, I won't do a third chemistry react in 2 weeks because it'll be Thanksgiving and we'll all be busy. But you know, maybe we'll have some more stuff to save for to react to in December. So I think I'm going to say thanks for joining me tonight. I hope you, learned something and/or were entertained, and maybe you'll go and watch some chemistry videos yourself, because I think it's very entertaining. If you did like the video, please be sure to interact with it, press the like button, and use the hype feature and all that, because it will help the channel grow, and I really appreciate that kind of interaction. We'll be back next week with some Mega Man Maverick Hunter X on Monday. We'll be doing something for Tuesday that I've not yet figured out, but looks like it's going to be either Sonic Spinball or a random Mega Man game, which we're voting on in the Discord, by the way. If you're not in the Discord, I have a Discord in the description. Feel free to join if you like talking about video games and maybe some science, too. And then on Thursday, we will be back with more chemistry reaction next week. Starting off with, not starting with the Nile Red video, but, after a bit of a primer, we'll get into the Nile Red video. It'll be the main piece. It's an hour long. So with that, I'm thinking I will be saying good night, and I will talk to you all later. Thanks for joining me, and I don't know, keep it scientific, keep it smart. That's the best I got. Good night.